5 House committees are calling on the FBI to brief them into its investigation into the domestic terrorism that unfolded on Capitol Hill Wednesday. The committee chairs blame President Trump for inciting the violence, which left 5 people dead, including a Capitol Police officer. They are also calling for those behind the crimes to be brought to justice. Congressman Bennie Thompson is one of the chairs who signed that letter. He is the head of the Committee on Homeland Security, and he joins us now. Congressman, thanks so much for being with us. We are also really happy that you are doing well, you and your colleagues, given the events that transpired on Wednesday. Let's begin with that letter. What information have you received so far from the FBI, the intelligence community, or law enforcement?
Well, to this point, we've only received an acknowledgement of the letter. We anticipate, though, to have a face-to-face, one way or the other, with the director of the FBI to indicate to us what intelligence was available, to indicate to us what are they doing at this point to bring those individuals who breached the Capitol to justice. So we need that briefing as members of Congress. If there are some things that we need to fix, we can only fix it if we get the adequate and correct information. All we have now is what's in the public arena. We absolutely need to hear it from the professionals.
You know, there's only a couple of weeks left in this administration, but even after the 20th, when Joe Biden becomes the president, the supporters of President Trump will still be around. What action or legislation are House Democrats considering to make sure that what happened on Wednesday never happens again?
Well, this is part of the action review. We have to see exactly what happened, what systems failed, how do we fix them? Was it a leadership issue? Which some of us think it was, but also was it a matter of resources available? Was it a matter of lack of coordination of existing resources? We have to, from a due diligence standpoint, get to all of the facts. One of the individuals we have to talk to is the FBI director. We have to talk to people at Homeland Security because it was an act of domestic terrorism. We have to talk to the Secret Service. So it will take a little while to get us where we need to be, but it's part of the information gathering process that we absolutely have to do in order to fix the problem.
Congressman, are you aware of any information, because there's some reporting out there that the Capitol Hill police may have been offered additional manpower in anticipation of these actions that were planned, as you know, Congressman, for many days, in fact, several weeks before they actually transpired. The president had tweeted about it. He had tweeted, January 6th to his supporters. We knew that this was going to happen. Are you aware of any assistance that the Capitol Hill police may have been offered and rejected?
Well, I'm aware from the public arena that offers were made and they were turned down. But I am also aware that other members of Democratic House leadership called governors and the vice president and others asking for help. So again, this is part of the information process. If in fact help was offered and turned down, that is a systems failure on the part of leadership. It will take us a little while to get through all of the details, but I assure you that at the end of the day, once that information is properly gathered and interpreted, we'll make a decision. As you know, both Sergeant at Arms of the House and the Senate have already been discharged. The head of the Capitol Police likewise has tendered his resignation effective next week. But, you know, this is not just those individuals at the top. It was a systems failure. But I can't let President Trump off the hook. He created this nightmare right after the November election by inviting people to Washington because he said it would be wild. That is not executive leadership. That's not what a commander-in-chief should do. And he has to bear the burden and liability for what occurred.
Congressman, just before we move on to talking about the president and possible impeachment once again, let me just ask you, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to look at the size of the budget of the Capitol Hill Police Department. They are going to, in their minds before Wednesday, they perhaps thought that the halls of Congress, Capitol Hill, the chambers, House chambers were perhaps, with the exception of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the most secure location on earth. Were you surprised, just as a member of Congress, a longtime member of Congress, the speed by which, these interlopers, these insurrectionists, as President George W. Bush called them, were able to just sort of breach the Capitol building and find themselves sitting in the Speaker's chair or in the seat that the Vice President had just occupied moments ago? I mean, it strikes me that when we saw some of the actions that were taken by the National Guard and the police over the protests this summer in Washington, D.C., and when the president wanted that photo op at the church, you would think that that would be the same kind of response if anybody was trying to get into the place where Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, sits and does her work every day.
Well, there's no question. It was a complete systems failure. And we have to look at it and see what components or lack of components that created that failure. A number of individuals, the vice president on down, lives were put at risk because of that failure. And we have to look at it and make sure it doesn't happen again. There is, on face value, the appearance of a double standard. There's a standard when the majority of the demonstrators are black, as well as the standard for when the majority of demonstrators are white. In my mind and in the minds of the majority of Congress, there's only one standard. And that standard has to apply to individuals regardless of race, creed, or color. And it's obvious that standard was not applied when it came to protecting the United States Capitol.
Sorry, I'm just getting some information about the president. He's back tweeting again, apparently saying that he's not going to the inauguration of Mr. Biden. But I want to sort of pivot a little bit away from that. Speaking of the president, we've learned that the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, is going to be having a conference call to sort of take the temperature of House members when it comes to impeachment. Your colleague, Congresswoman Catherine Clark of Massachusetts, said this morning that an impeachment vote could happen in the middle of next week. That's if the 25th Amendment isn't invoked. I want to ask you, your take on this, on floating the idea of either invoking the 25th Amendment or impeachment before the president's term is over.
Well, I'm one of those 200-plus members of the House who have signed the impeachment document. We have to do our duties. We can't shirk our duties just because of the timing. Donald Trump has to bear the liability of what has occurred in this incident. He promoted it. He provided the fuel that created the breach and what occurred at the United States Capitol. So we will have to do our job. The legislative function, in terms of what we look at, we have to look at all those remedies. Now, the other part is whether or not there will be other opportunities to address it when he's no longer president. I'm one of those individuals who think even though you're president, you're not above the law. So I'm looking forward to the complete and thorough review of this process. And if he's complicit in any way to being able to be charged, I'm looking forward to those charges being brought.
Have you spoken to some of your Republican colleagues, Congressman, about the possibility of bringing forward articles of impeachment? We had a United States Senator on our air this morning, Senator Ben Sasse, who said, unlike what he and his other colleagues said back in January, that he was open to what the House was going to ultimately decide.
Well, to be honest with you, that 200-plus individuals who signed the impeachment resolution is significant. The question is whether or not we can do it. If Catherine Clark's analysis of bringing it forward is correct, then I'll support that. We have to do our duties as members of Congress. Donald Trump has really fostered a climate in this country that is clearly not who we are as Americans. We have to address that. So as long as he's alive, he will wear this as a badge of dishonor. His reputation as president is tarnished for the rest of his life. And we can't move away from what occurred by saying he's no longer president.
There's been a lot of focus on the words that the president used, particularly at that rally right before that mob of demonstrators descended on the Capitol. But, you know, there were other lawmakers as well who were supportive of this idea that the election was fraudulent, floating the idea that the election outcome could somehow be overturned. In fact, even after the Capitol building was cleared out and they were able to resume the proceedings, you know, we saw Senator Cruz oppose the electoral votes from Arizona. We saw opposition for the electoral votes from Pennsylvania. What should happen to these lawmakers who continue to sort of support these kind of debunked ideas that this was a fraudulent election?
Well, unfortunately, being stupid is not criminal. And so if you want to debunk all these things and put them out in the public arena, we should be able to evaluate that for what they are. And we depend on the news media to push the facts out as they are. You don't have to take one side or the other. But it's clear in this instance that words matter. And if you're in a leadership position in this country, you should take your job seriously and promote accuracy in information. We can disagree, but let's disagree on principles. But the facts are the facts, and they shouldn't be altered in any manner. And we should respect the wishes of the people. In those instances, a lot of my colleagues are not doing that. And because of that, you saw what was displayed on Wednesday. But you see in them who I believe is a minority in this country. And ultimately, we have to make sure that we have to not let individuals like that assume any significant position of power and responsibility, because they are dangerous. And so President Trump and a lot of those people who are elected need to step back and understand that words matter. And in a democracy, sure, you have freedom of speech, but you also have to understand those freedoms should not infringe and encourage other people to do wrong. Because if you do, there's liability associated with it.
Congressman, Anne-Marie just mentioned the president tweeted that he will not be attending the inauguration of President-elect Joe Biden. You, during our discussion, have talked about the importance of words and how words matter, but so do actions. Correct. I'm 99% sure that the last president to not attend an inauguration was Andrew Johnson, who was also impeached and did not attend President U.S. Grant's inauguration. So we've had a tradition in this country of showing to the rest of the world this peaceful transfer of power that happens every 4 years on January 20th. Now, the president is rejecting that. I guess my question has to do more with what that will mean for a Biden administration. In other words, to not have the supposed blessing of your predecessor by attending the inauguration. What kind of a message does that send to those 75 million people who voted for President Trump, who continue to believe that the election was fraudulent?
Well, the worst kept secret in town is this announcement that President Trump won't attend the inauguration. Most of us already acknowledged that that wouldn't occur. But more importantly, it goes to the character of the individual. If you don't respect the institution and the organization that you serve in, then you're not worthy of that institutional organization. Look, his legacy is predetermined. He will go down as the worst president in the history of the United States. And for the most part, all of the determining factors were self-inflicted. So he can't blame Democrats. He can't blame anybody but himself on what he did. And unfortunately for this country, we are much worse off because of the last 4 years. His ego would not accept him sitting on an inaugural podium and not being the center of attention. And in this instance, after the events of last Wednesday, it's clear the embarrassment, the ridicule, and potential prosecution associated with his last 4 years. He can't deal with it. So inauguration will go on. Joe Biden is a great man, and Kamala Harris is a great woman. Inauguration will go on. Donald Trump won't be missed. He's already sealed his fate in history, as I said, as the worst president the United States has ever known.
So looking past January 20th now, the Biden administration is going to be facing a number of sort of big crises. The Democrats will have both chambers, but of course that doesn't mean you get everything you want. What do you want to see this administration take on first? What are the big issues that need to be addressed right away?
Well, to be honest with you, we have to get our hands around this pandemic. We need executive leadership at the White House to make sure that leadership continues or start to be asked. This vaccine rollout is inconsistent at best. The lines you see in Florida should not be. The problems you see in Kansas should not be. The problems I see in my home state of Mississippi should not be. But all that's because the leadership necessary from the White House is non-existent. Joe Biden will provide that executive leadership to move us forward for the next 100 days in addressing the pandemic. In addition to that, we have to have an infrastructure package. Our highways, our bridges are crumbling. I'm from a rural state. We have broadband deployment in many areas that's non-existent. Most of our kids in Mississippi are going to school virtually, and they're struggling because of access to the internet. So we have to work on that. The other thing is we have to resurrect the image of the United States to our partners around the world. The last 4 years has created significant damage to our image. You've seen the reports of what the newspapers are saying because of the breach in the Capitol. We have to not be perceived as the arrogant Americans. We have to, in a leadership position, you don't have to beat on your chest. You don't have to remind people you're number one. There's a saying we have in the black church, let the work I've done speak for me. So if we do that as Americans, we'll assume our rightful leadership role. So Joe Biden has a lot to do. As you know, education is a struggle in this country. He has an educational platform. So he has a lot to on his plate, but he's up to the task. He's not a rookie. He's worked with Democrats and Republicans historically. And to be honest with you, it's a new day. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris gives us that opportunity to be the great country that we all know we can be.
All right, 12 days to go. Congressman Bennie Thompson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.